Hello and welcome to the Wild Wonder podcast. I am your host, Kristen Llorca, and today I have yoga teacher and community leader, Lorena. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Kristen. It's so good to be with you today.
So, Lorena, you are not originally from the US, correct?
I was born in Peru, born and raised in Peru.
What part?
Lima.
So, the capital. When did you arrive here in the United States?
In the early 2000s. I was very young.
So I think this is important. Normally I don't go into a lot of practitioners' backgrounds, but I think it's important to go there with you because it is why you do what you do. So what was your immigrant experience?
Oof. It was painful. It was very painful, but at the same time, it brought me to the place where I am right now. I came in my early 20s, and like many people, searching for a better future. I came with a lot of emotions and a lot of ideas of what my life in the US will be. But things didn't work that way at the beginning. And I got into a very bad depression, and my emotional state was not very stable. And this is why I discovered the art of yoga and meditation.
So when you came here, what was the political or social climate in Peru that made the United States look better in comparison?
Yeah, we were just finalizing or getting into a better place after a very bad social word, and it was not stable. It was not. There was a little bit of, you can see that it was future. The future was looking nice, but it was time also for me to search for something else. I knew that there will be more opportunities in that in Peru, and it's sad to say it, but it was the real truth.
Right.
Back then.
How old were you then when you
I
decided
was
to be Peru?
22.
22. Yeah, it's about the time where you start to decide where your future lies, right? What career potentials there could be, and in a place where there isn't. My only comparison to that would be around the same time we were going through here, the recession. So you probably ended up here during that same time. So during that time, I was graduating grad school, and the recession hit. I felt like it hit Miami's community, maybe not first, but it felt really heavy here. So that my career outlook didn't seem to be that great, and so I moved to New York. I didn't do the extreme of like Peru to the United States, but as a comparison, that's that time of your life where you're really having to decide what you're going to do with your life, and to be in a place that where you don't see opportunity. I could see that as really gut-wrenching almost, to grow up in one place and then see that maybe your future is not there. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, and it was, honestly, it was an adventure for me. It was, I feel like being part of the civil war, right? Of being and it was, I needed that experience. I needed that different, like, air. Um, and yeah, in my early 20s, and I finished some of my higher education in Peru, and then this is when I decided to move here to the States. Um, I, like a lot of people, I feel my intention was not overstayed. My intention was here, come for a couple of years, and then go home, because I came with a student visa.
Right.
Things didn't happen
Right.
as right. Things didn't happen as planned, and the life and circumstances moved me to in many different directions. But I really believe that one of the main reasons I had to go through that is because years later,
Mhm.
I have to talk about that. I
Right.
have, I have to talk about it, and I can be at service to people who are in the same situation nowadays.
Right. So now, as a voice to the Latin American community, and as a voice specifically to female Latin American women and immigrants and refugees, it's important to note your coming to yoga. How did that happen, as you yourself being an immigrant woman, searching for the tools to overcome what you described as a rough time in your life?
Yeah, so I went through a bad patch where I found myself by myself, because I don't have any family here, no distant relative, nobody. So I went through different places and different um, energetic places where I thought that I will find what I was needed, but nothing was giving me or keeping me or pulling me away from the depression. And it was very intense. So I was seeing a therapist back then. And I remember she saying, you need to maybe do something different, right? So search for something that can quiet your mind. So, and I always was curious about yoga and meditation and all these, I call it technologies, right? All these
Right.
technologies. Because back in Peru, growing up, I have seen people doing yoga. I have seen people using this wisdom in different ways, but using
Mhm.
them. So it was not completely new. However, right, the way that yoga was presented to me when I went to look for it here in the States, it was a little different than what I have seen in Peru.
Right.
And my first experience was magical, like many people can describe it. And then little by little, I decided that I wanted to get more involved into it. I took the courage to sign up for a yoga class in a yoga studio, right? Because that's what normal people do.
Right.
Um,
And that
and
was your first class, was in the yoga studio?
no, my first
Oh.
class was not in a yoga studio, was in a gym,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And like many, but the teacher was very masterful in the way that she delivered her class. It really got me hooked.
Mhm.
So when I found out, and when I feel like the environment of a gym was not giving me what I was looking for,
Mhm.
I decided to save my money, because yoga classes and yoga studios for a person like me who was broken in many ways, including financially,
Right.
was a luxury.
Mhm.
So I had my secondhand clothes
Mm.
and my second hand that I found from the second hand store yoga mat, and I went to a yoga studio. And I'm grateful that I live in a place back in the days. I live in the place where it was a little bit upscale.
Mhm.
Uh, and my first class in a yoga studio was no fun. I got to say it. It was kind of like the reality check.
Right.
Uh, yeah, I
Well,
was
I
confused.
can imagine. What was the class like? What kind of people went there? Were you potentially the only Latin American woman in the class?
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I was and I have to overcome the fears, not only to be in a yoga studio, but also the fears to be the only one that looks different,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
So, and I was already feeling like I didn't belong, because my circumstances with my immigration status.
Mhm. Right.
But, and, I had to overcome that. And the icing on the cake was when I went to the front desk.
Mhm.
I was confused by the cleaning crew.
Oh. So you were mistaken for a cleaning lady when you were actually there as a student.
Yeah, yeah. And it took me a long time to bypass that and make it a positive experience, but I did.
Mhm.
And I remember, again, the yoga teacher, who was different than the person or the teacher in the gym.
Mhm.
She did a very nice job on, like, going through the sequence and making me feel welcome in my own space, after the rough patch in the front desk.
Mhm.
I remember towards the end, and for those of you who are into yoga, it was towards the reflection and shavasana. Um, I remember there's something like really burn inside and say, one day
Mhm.
I will have a place like this that will welcome people like me and people who does not necessarily feel part of. And something, a seed was let down that day,
Mhm.
I feel like. And years later, things move in many different directions. And years later, I have my own yoga studios.
But yes, and it lit that fire in you that if you hadn't gone through that, I don't know, struggle at the beginning, that feeling of not belonging, you would have not realized the problem. Because as we walk through the world, I mean, you're Latin American, you come from another country, or your parents come from another country, but you don't feel other until someone reminds you that you're different, right?
And yeah, and I was reminded very much so that day.
Yeah. I mean,
that
I've also been mistaken for a cleaning crew, or the lady that gets the coffee. So I get it. And I was born here, so it's a revelation. And I think it's what a lot of people, not only yoga practitioners, but I think the industry as a whole does. I think they're doing a better job now of maybe asking the questions. But historically, I don't think it's something that was even considered. For instance, you Google yoga and it's like women in their 40s, mostly white, relaxing, like with some stones or by a beach somewhere, We're not
is true.
like, you're not seeing yourself in these images.
And you know what is the issue with that? I feel like that for many years I was not, I cannot deny my own skin because I wanted it to fit into a place where I was not represented. So I have to, for many ways, in many ways, when you come to this, when you go to, it's like when you go. I mean, I have taught from family, when you go to somebody else's house, you
Mhm.
respect the house, right? And you eat the food that they gave you, and you follow the order of the house. So for me, when I moved to the States, this was my house, so I have to
Mhm.
follow rules, and I have to go with the people, right, and the
Mhm.
culture. So, which I think is important. However, the downside to that is that for many years, I deny my own skin, I deny my own culture, my own traditions, not because I wouldn't, I because I feel like imposing traditions in a place like, is not also the right thing to do, but
Mhm.
to find the common ground. So I
Right.
was not, it took me years to get to the place where I can actually feel on balance to blend both things, the American culture, which in the American country, which, for me, this is my home. I've been here for many, many years, right? So this is what I really grew up.
Yeah. And then there's the idea of, I've been thinking a lot, coming to terms with my own Latin Americanness, being born here in this country. But I think a lot, I used to deny my own race and culture in order to not only fit in, but to be able to thrive in this environment. And I've been thinking a lot of, in yoga terms, like if my spirit was born into this body, this Latin American body, then this body has something to teach me, right? So I can't deny this, and I think in a lot of yoga philosophy, as it's taught here in the West, it tends to whitewash everything so that, we are all the same because we are all spirit. And yes, and no, there's the duality of, yes, we are all spirit, and also we are born into these very different looking bodies in a world that treats different bodies differently.
Yeah, and I also have to say that I agree with you that the industry is changing, many things to rescue about what happened in 2020 when the world came, we crashed because of COVID. And I think it had opened the opportunity to showcase different bodies doing things that we normally don't see them doing. Right. So yeah, I gotta recognize that as well. That is, the industry is changing for good, I hope. And then I'm the kind of person who likes to see the glass. How do you say that? The glass. Yes. But I also recognize that there's a lot to work. There's a lot of work to do.
And what is that work that's left? Like I see some change, but I also see, I don't know if resistance, but I see some non-change, that's not happening. What would you most like to see in the yoga industry as a whole changing?
Whew, that's a tricky and very big question.
Right. We could piecemeal it.
Yeah. I think it's not only for the yoga industry, I think in the wellness industry, there's a lot of work to be done. There is people who is doing it, right? So representation for sure is the bigger piece of this puzzle. And I mean, giving the place or giving the opportunity to people that don't necessarily have had the chance to showcase their abilities and their knowledge, not only as a yoga practitioner, but as a meditation and mindfulness mentors and other kinds of wellness leaders or teachers. I think that's important. And to value, if I would have one thing to choose from all the points that we can start, going or moving forward, I would say to value the opinion and the experience of people that does not look what the industry is or have pushed for them to feel the experts are.
Right.
Or so it's so sad. And I say this from a personal experience, right? So I have to work twice harder for my voice to be heard, right? Because I speak funny, I communicate funny, but that doesn't mean that I don't know what I'm talking about. I've been doing this work for a long time. So, like that is kind of like, if I would have said what thing we can work on is like take away the image of the person that is in front of you and just listen what they have to say.
As equal to others, because I think what's happening now, even though the conversation is opening up to include people of color and people from other countries, I think there's still, at least I feel, as like there's an idea of tokenship. Like you're the Latin American in the room, and then we have the Black woman, and then we have, you know, the Indian man. You know, so instead of it being, I don't know, it feels like there's not the real desire and also even playing field to say that all of our experiences are equal to each other, to this bigger idea.
It's true. And, you know, you mentioned in a great point about tokenizing people, right? And for almost 20 years, I have been tokenized. And back in, you know, talking about 6 or 7, maybe 10 years ago, it hurt. It really hurt. But at the same time, I knew that somebody have to be there, you know, somebody who speak funny have to be there. So, oh well, it had to be me. I take it. I take it. I prepare for it, and you know, that's kind of like the way the people that have a little bit of, you know, their voice are being heard, have to take their way on, and it's. But I feel at the same time that, you know, things are moving, things are changing. So if you would have asked me again, if we would have this conversation 7 years ago, I'd be like, okay, whatever, let's do it. I know, you know, you need a brown body there. Got it. But nowadays it's like, hold on, momentito, un ratito. You know, I am a brown body, but I also have knowledge. So you will have to treat me in the same way and value my expertise. Right. Because now it's like you know, something have broken open. So and that is good for us, right? Good for us, and for the organizations that are willing to do this kind of work, because I don't think it's an easy work for them either, right? No. I praise them because it's a hard job.
No, I'm grateful that they've started the conversation, because obviously I wouldn't have thought we'd be having this conversation or been in the groups that we've been in even 5 years ago. I don't think.
No, and it was hard to be you know, as a business owner. You know, it was tough. It was one of the toughest jobs I ever had in my life. It was being a yoga studio business owner. Yeah, because I did not only have to work with all the things that I had to do to maintain a well-maintained studio and stuff like that. And having teachers working for me and for the community, but it also was the struggle to be, you know, somebody who does not feel it belongs. And people who, you know, it was so hard to find somebody who I can relate to.
Right. But here you are, and you did it. God bless you. When I speak to people as yourself and other practitioners that we've had on the podcast, I'm grateful for the work, because there has to be someone out in front. Like when they open the door an inch, you're going to put your foot in and bust it through, and then the rest can come, right? So it's just all that work, and I have to think of any work we do, we're doing it for all of us.
And I took that job very responsibly as well, right? Because I knew when I went through the to my dream, I'll become a yoga practitioner, yes, and a yoga teacher, and then an educator, and pursue all this, you know, high education in yoga. I knew that it's not going to be easy, and I knew that the room is not going to be in the room. It's not going to be people that looks and feels and have the same appreciation for the practice with my own cultural experience. But yes, when I took the chance, the chance and the opportunity was presented for me to be, you know, for my voice to be heard, I put my foot and I did not move, because I knew I knew that eventually this, what is happening in 2021, will happen, and more people like like yourself and me, will come after us. So it's a huge responsibility. It was a huge responsibility then, and it's still a very much responsibility for us, as leaders, like you mentioned.
Absolutely. And I think we should speak to, you mentioned our culture. If we could speak, because there's the yoga culture as it's been traditionally taught, and then there's the culture we bring with us, right? And me, myself, when I first started yoga, I was, all in. Let's do the whole yoga thing, learn all the yogic archetypes and the whole traditional system. And then I went through, I don't know, it was there's always a fight with yoga. It's like a relationship, right? You're constantly like embattled with this thing. And I thought, where is my culture in this, right? I mean, this isn't my culture. I'm not from India,
Right.
I can understand it, I can appreciate it, I can use it with respect, but do I feel it in my gut that this is mine? And then how do we bring our culture into an established system like this, or any wellness system?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question, and or a beautiful thought process. It was not easy for me too, by the way, and I think we all go through our yoga path in many different ways. What I found out was that I was incorporating some of the things that I brought in, right? And to be more precise, some of the teachings from my abuelita, my grandmothers, right? That after years of education and investigation, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what yoga philosophy is all about, right? So I feel like, how did I blend it, or how we blend what we bring in culturally, we bring into these practices is important, because that's the way that we are able to become our own creators, the creators of our own path. Um, so I recently start the realization that, well, first of all, I needed to feel safe on my body, and this is why I think it's important we talk about this, right? So if we would have had this conversation 15 years ago, I was like you, probably many, where like I was so into the whole culture of the yoga culture that is exposed here.
I'm sorry, you broke up a second.
Okay, there you go. So what I was saying is that back 15 years ago, I was all in the whole yoga idea that is brought into this part of the world. And I'm very grateful that I wanted to continue to grow in the practice, because it's through it that I find a safe space on my body, right? I was able to find myself not only peace of mind, but peace of my heart, peace of my body. And I was able to actually put my skin back together, right? So it was then that I was ready to kind of like do the blend between what I brought in from my Peruvian roots and my shamanic roots with the engineering of Western technology, and or Eastern technology, I should say. So it I think and it became like a magical path.
Right.
And like I said, recently I decided that I want to go into that direction. The reason behind it is because a lot of people don't have, I mean, I wouldn't say they don't have, but it's like it took me almost 15 years to get here. So if I can put it all together and work it in a way for my students and my clients to actually acknowledge that from the beginning.
Right.
I'm seeing incredible results on that with clients.
And I think it's fundamentally important because we are, when you work with someone, there has to be an acknowledgement of that person's belief system. And at least when I was starting out in yoga, I don't think I was offered that grace. You know, it was kind of like, this is yoga and this is what we believe. But I think you can help a person heal so much better when you're able to not only understand them, but empathize with them and speak to their belief system.
Yeah, definitely. You know, here comes the twist of yoga and the cultural component of the teaching in itself, right? Mm-hmm. So I appreciate the knowledge of teachers from this part of the world, but then when they do the crossover to the Hispanic community, they like copy and paste what they teach mm-hmm. here there, right. And that doesn't it is not sustainable. Mm-hmm. It's not sustainable. There's no deeper roots. However, when you're able to blend it to the roots of these communities, mm-hmm. the change, the healing, and so on is sustainable. People can actually stick with it for many, many years to come.
And also to acknowledge that each community and each country and each village is different and have their own set of belief systems. Because I think we can also misstep and be like, oh, now we're going to do yoga for a Latin American community and we're going to speak in Spanish and we're going to say these things and we're going to do it. And it doesn't work because we're not homogenous, yes. Right? There's belief systems in your country that wouldn't necessarily be the same for my family and vice versa.
Exactly. So it's not like, like trying to put us all together and it's like, okay, this is all Hispanic people. It's like, yeah, we speak the same language and there's different names where they put us, and I appreciate all of them. But to understand that we're different, we are different, our roots of culture are different, and our struggles as society are also different.
Right. And that's important to note. So you do work with immigrant communities. Are they as heterogeneous as I imagine them to be? Are they people from all over Latin America, or are they primarily from certain areas?
Well, because of the area that I'm in the DC area, there is a huge population of Central American and Peruvians, and so it's very different. And yet, here comes the caveat of all this, right? Like when I do my work as a yoga therapist with an immigrant, right, or a person that is dealing with situation like I was years ago, I have to treat them so differently because their roots and their belief systems are they're Hispanic, but they're not the same. Mm-hmm. They're not the same. But it's beautiful because when I get to get into the common ground, mm-hmm. that put us in the same level as, we are, we're Hispanic. Mm-hmm. Although I'm not from Central America, I'm from South America. There is something that unites us. Mm-hmm. And it's beautiful because like the transformation, the process in itself, it turns so, how can I say this? It's unique in many ways, but at the same time it's like if my brother, my sister is going through it, and they're not blood related, mm-hmm. right? But they are.
Right. What do you feel are these unifying belief systems across all Latin America and the Caribbean?
Well, in the Caribbean, don't forget about the Caribbean, right? We're friends from the Caribbean. Once we and I'm not an authority to talk about that, but I only can talk from my
No,
experience.
from your experience.
Yeah, from my experience, I do believe we come together on the value of the elements and the value of earth and the value of the natural resources, and because that's how we've been taught back in, like your abuelita, your auntie, your mama, or even your papa. They tells you, you have to take
Right.
care of plants, or you have to work in the land, or so.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you that's something that goes to me, it's very dearly to me. It's like, I have a connection with the water, right, with the
Right.
ocean, because I grew up in closer to the ocean. But it's more than a connection. It's like the devotion that there is divine in those elements. So I have seen that kind of is like the common ground. So when we are able to bypass, because there's many belief systems that are underneath that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Each one of us carry and informed through years of experiences and terror and so. But once
Colonialization.
was I?
And colonialization.
Well, I didn't want to say it, but yeah, sorry.
I didn't.
Yeah,
It's my fault.
yeah. But it's true, So once we are able to unpack all that, we come into in terms where like, oh, what is your relationship with nature? And it's boom, something happened. They, I said, like me, right? So it's like, I know that I am part of nature. I'm living in the life of the living,
Right.
but I don't necessarily feel the difference. But to get there, it took me years, right?
Right.
Years.
And when you said that, I got goosebumps because I did. First of all, I didn't expect you to say it. It was surprising, and then it was so true that I was like, "Yeah, that's it. It's a somatic experience of Earth developed over generations and generations and generations." Yeah.
Yeah. And talking about different ways to see that, right? For us, from us, people from Peru, and I carry lineage of the Incas, right? So
Mhm.
we see the life in a different way, right? So but if I talk to somebody from Central America, it's pretty much the same.
Mhm.
And it's very unique. They have their own rituals, their own things to do, but at the end, they're, like I say, they're my brothers and my sisters.
And I think you're speaking to the somatic experience because although I'm not from Central or South America, I don't know that I have any indigenous roots. I can connect to the somatic experience of working the land and working with your hands, whether that's cooking in the kitchen with your grandma or, developing or making a tea or serving your neighbors things from your garden or flowers, whatever, like that physical and felt experience of Earth.
Definitely. So and nowadays I use somatic healing more than yoga have given me so many tools, but through the years I developed this this passion about movement that is more than anything is like what you mentioned, right? So it's working and feeling
Mm.
feeling what is inside through your body. However, there's something important to mention that to get there, right, we have to feel safe in our bodies, and sometimes we don't. So is that in itself is a process, right? But yes, feeling or working with our hands, working with our bodies, that's that's yoga.
Mm.
However, we do I'm not gonna call it yoga because I don't want to be inappropriate on cultural appropriation. But
Mm.
we do our own. And when I say we, not people from Peru, people
Right.
from the mountains and the Andes, we do our own way to canalize energy through the body. This is what we dance, the way that we dance, and we connect to the to the mountains, and we connect to the ocean, and we connect to the land, and we connect to the fire. So it is the beauty of it is like these ancient traditions and these ancient technologies, because this is not because they're updated.
Right.
For the contrary, right? Is keep proving us that in our modern society there's space for it, and people is moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
People are moving in that direction.
I
So
think the commonality there is the belief that our body is our home and our earth is our home.
yeah, that sounds very nice, but in reality, that's
No, not in reality, but I feel like that's where we're trying to get to, or maybe on a subconscious level. I think that's what, as practitioners, we could speak to people to that desire to be home in their body and to feel home in the world.
Home and safe.
And safe.
Saved, I think, is the importance. And when I say, it sounds very nice and sounds in Spanish, suena bonito, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're, the earth is your home. No, somebody 100 years or many years ago took my land away from me, and and my body has been stolen, and my skin has been stolen many years ago, and nowadays it keeps getting stolen because the media keep imposing me that my color, my body, my ways to do things are not what society wants.
Yeah.
So get there I think that to get there, I think we are in a good direction. Education is the key, certainly. And empowerment to our roots.
But yes, because this feeling of disassociation, when we don't feel connected to our body or connected to this earth, it's a trauma response. And I believe part of your work is using yoga therapy or these somatic techniques to help people overcome and recover from trauma. Can you speak to that? How that works?
It's a beautiful work. It's a beautiful work. And again, and this is something that I do in a very individual setting, right? But I normally work with people nowadays. My work is based on people who are struggling with the intimidating struggles of immigration. And it's because in a way I can relate to that and they can relate to me, right? So there is a connection right there. And I use the somatic experience of somatic movements, so everything that is related to the movement of the body, for them to feel safe in their body, for them to feel safe, to feel how they feel. And like I said before, it's a beautiful work, and at the same time, it keeps showing me that ancient traditions, ancient knowledge is valid, is contemporary, and is how can I say this? Is people can actually, it's measurable. The results can be measured, right? So it's not like it's not a placebo effect, and it's gonna make you feel in your head, and no, you see results. That's something that is important for people to know, that once you start into this path, you will see that. Of course, it requires a lot of work, and you have to want to go through it. But once you make peace with that, the results are incredible.
They are. Can you, I guess, take us through, because some people might not understand what this somatic techniques may be or what you do. Can you maybe give an example, maybe a specific example of a person you worked with without mentioning their name, how you took them through this experience?
So I have a Peruvian woman, and she's one of my clients, and because of the area that I am, there is people who have high end positions in different organizations, and this person is one of her she have a big responsibility in her company. Let's put it this way,
Okay.
right? So, she came to me because she's a struggle. She doesn't have necessarily struggles with immigration, but she has a lot of stuff coming out from childhood, right? So what we decide, because in my sessions and in yoga therapy, what we do is I don't tell what they give me the answer. I just take notes and I just guide them, right? But the decision is up to me or to the client or the student. So we came into the realization that she needed to connect to her body, and she didn't know how to connect through it because for many years she was put on this black suit, so tied up. Hair had to be incredible tight. She was tied up from the outside in to the inside.
So would you say she was like stepping into a role, not necessarily stepping into her body, but stepping into this position?
Right. Yeah. So what we were able to do is that through not only somatic techniques, but through breathing, a little bit of yoga and movement, she was able to literally during the session start dancing. And when she remembered how free she felt when she was a little girl in dancing, something happened. Something broke open. So stuff like that, right? And then what I normally do is depending of if the relationship that I have with the client or the student is, I use a lot of music as well and a lot of sound that it can remember or can trigger good memories, good bodily sensations. And for that session I put music that is very dear to our hearts in the Peruvian culture. And she was not only present through her body, but her whole senses, include through his hearing, was able to to connect and to actually found out herself when she was a little girl. So it's something like that, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because it simplifies it. It doesn't make it so woo out here abstract. They're actual tools that we all have at our disposal. But we might need someone like you to be able to first help us identify that there's a trauma, if we're not there already. And secondly, to help guide this experience of coming back into our body and really remembering who we are.
That's the key. And this is this is something that is important to me as practitioner and as a yoga therapist is and a practitioner in of other lineages, is that I don't give the prescription, right? We work together. It's like we co-create. I'm only the guide or the person that take notes and give, hey, this is what I took notes, this is what I have used, and this is what my work, right? And here comes the aspect of me blending things, because and I was able to blend some of the teachings and some of the concepts of yoga philosophy with what I learned from my grandma and my abuelitas.
Right.
What it says, just dance it all. If you feel tied up and if you cannot breathe, just dance it off. And if you want to put a little bit more extra things, just dance it to the water, dance it to the fire, dance it to the mountains, dance it to the elements. Here comes I was able to, in that particular session, I was able to blend that up. And of course, if you put that in a context of like yoga philosophy, I probably will be off of it. Like, what are you doing? Right? What are you doing? But here comes the essence of using these technologies blended with my cultural experience and the people's experience and cultural backgrounds that my clients have.
And it takes courage, I believe, on both ends, because speaking as a practitioner, usually a client would come in or a student and they would want you to tell them exactly what to do. So it takes some courage and some restraint to not just give them the textbook, here, do this, this, and that, and you'll be a new person by the end of the session. And then it takes a great amount of courage on the other end to be able to trust you enough to trust themselves, right? To go on this journey for themselves.
Yeah. Well, this was not the first session with this person, right? So we have a history together. And like I say, we kind of unpacked a lot of things before we got there. And when I found the common ground, right? And the common ground was, whereas the cultural common ground, this is like, okay, I think this could work. And it's not as unrelated to the yoga philosophy. It is related in many ways. I just put my twist of the Peruvian shamanic things, and it worked.
Right. It's just a different flavor. I forget what yogi, because I'm terrible at quotes, but there was a yogi that said, religions are just different flavors of the same thing. We could say yoga can be just different flavors of the same truth.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it makes total sense.
Yeah. So what do you think is next for us, Latin American wellness healers and leaders?
I think we have a huge responsibility for all of us who have, this exposure. It's a huge responsibility to keep engaging and educating people on our ways to do things, not imposing, because I don't think that's it have to come from that point. But it's more like, this is who we are. And people are honestly in and I keep talking about South America, but I don't want to forget about, Central America and the Caribbean. Is people, they're awaking, right? So they know what is when somebody goes to these places and trying to impose something.
Yeah.
Right. So they feel that, and I think it's awesome. So what is next? Education. Keep educating our youth and our youngers to don't let them forget the connection that we have with the divine, whatever it is, it is what it is, right? And I think 2020 was in a year that we're never gonna forget.
You live in infamy.
2021 and forward, I think it will be times where we as society come back to simplicity. Simplicity, but it's not under like we go. Maybe simplicity is not the right word that I want to use. We come back to the things that are not too complicated. So, and us as healers and teachers and mentors have the responsibility to hold the space for those who don't have necessarily the abilities, or not what I said abilities, then the knowledge and the skills, because it's about remembering. We all have that true nature, right? We all have, in Buddhism we call it the Buddha nature, right? So we all have Christ nature. We all have the divine in ourselves, but for many different reasons, it's been either stolen from us or we forgot about it. So I think the years to come, we are tempted to go in that direction, I feel like.
I think so too. And I'd like to highlight the idea of holding space. I think it's undervalued. I think it takes tremendous energy for a person, whether it's a wellness practitioner or just being a human being on the planet, to be able to hold space for someone, to be able to allow a person to be seen and to share their experience and to just be in the world.
It takes practice. It takes commitment. It takes courage. because it's not easy to be there for people. You know, going back to the experience I have with this woman, right? I mean, I have to hold the space for her, and this is what was all virtually, right? So I wasn't there for her to give her a hug, not like a we supposed to give hugs and so on, but
It
um,
happens.
yeah. So I have to be able to provide this safe space through the virtual world, so she can get into this somatic experience. I think we're learning as society how to hold the space virtually, but when everything comes to normal or the new normal,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think it will be incredible, um, beneficial for us to move forward as society, to learn the skills of how to hold the space for others,
Yeah.
and to hold the space for in how, if I can give a tip or a giveaway, I
Mm-hmm.
would say learn to hold the space with a person that you don't necessarily agree on with, or you don't like.
Yeah.
It's in your family, right? So if somebody's in your family you don't necessarily agree with, how are you going to hold the space for this person? It's a tough job, but the curiosity comes where, like, or a tip will be, what's your story?
Mm-hmm.
Just be the spectator of, like, what is really your story,
Right.
without putting ourselves into their life story. Just be there. It's
Right.
hard. It's not an easy job for sure.
It's like being the observer, right? In yoga and meditation, we speak to being able to sit as the observer to your own mental chemistry. I think what you're saying is that the more we're able to do that, we can do that for others as well. It's to be able to,
Oh,
like, sit outside of the experience without giving into the triggers,
definitely.
without giving into disassociation, and to just be able to be there.
Definitely. I think, the first person or the first entity that you want to be, or that you want to hold the space for, is yourself.
Mhm.
So it's like you want to become this person who is helping others. It's like, make sure that you help yourself first.
Yeah. And before we go, what is something someone could do to be able to get into that space every day or every week?
Um, to hold the space for myself, what I
Mhm.
do in I normally in the mornings when I wake up is like I give thanks, right, to whatever the divine is. I give thanks to that. I use gratitude for sure, and then before I do anything else, I make sure that I'm in my body. And there are different ways that you can do that. There are days that I feel like I think I'm gonna breathe deeply, for 2 minutes,
Mhm.
or there are other days where I need to hear stuff, right?
Mhm.
So depending on how do you know yourself, right? So it's either if you're in your bed and you and again need to come back to your body, you can hear something, that noise, being aware of noise,
Mhm.
or being aware of your breath. And something very simple too is, tapping yourself, like, okay, I'm here, I wake up, I give thanks, I'm in my body, I feel my fingers, my fingers are moving, my toes are moving, my arms are moving, I'm holding
Mhm.
myself, and good to go.
Yeah, I think, and I'm really into tapping now too. But I think it doesn't have to be anything extreme. I think in the Western world, we think we're gonna have to, like, get up and, like, run 20 miles or do a CrossFit class or something like that, or do some intense transcendental meditation. But getting into your body could be the hardest and the simplest thing. It's the hardest because sometimes we don't want to be here, and it's the easiest because the things we actually need to do aren't that physically trying.
And this is what I say, that years coming on, people are going to go through that, because we have been taught to do these drastically things. I'm like, just go back to the simplicity, go back to your breath, notice sound, and feel your body.
Right. I thank you for your wisdom, and I know we could talk so much more about this, and I want to. So maybe you could come back on another podcast episode, and we'll do something else. But I'm really grateful to have you here, and I would love for others to be able to find you. So we've listed it in our Crowdcast that's available to our Patreon members at patreon.com/Wild Wonder. And we have your website, we have your Instagram and your Facebook there. And if you're watching us on YouTube, it'll be on the show notes. If you're listening to the podcast, it'll be in the show notes there as well. Thank you so much. I can't wait to talk to you again.
Adios.
Adios.
Many blessings. Stay safe.
Stay safe. Bye.